Welcome to Backend Engineering, guys, and in this video we will be covering the project in depth. If you are preparing for an interview in 2024 and if you are a Java backend developer guy preparing for a senior dev position, then this video is for you. If you have, and the eligibility for this video should be at least 2+ experience in the IT industry and development. If you are somebody who is preparing to transition into development, this video is for you. If you are a fresher, this video is not for you. You can comment it down. I can come up with a separate video. What are the key areas to focus on in order to get into the backend development job, right? So let's not waste much of our time and quickly begin with it. In the part 1 of this video, in my other video, before the video I created before this, I have already told you that I've created a newsletter on suchet.substack.com. In that other video, I have explained you what are the different topics you need to create, right? The microservices, the different kind of frameworks, and the fundamentals part. I have already covered all these aspects into the other video. You can go and check it out. It's kind of half an hour video. You will get an idea how to prepare for your backend developer interview. But I left one part because this part was the big enough, which is your project in depth in the current organization. So let's say if you are preparing for any consulting company, let's say you are preparing for any company publishes Sapient, right? Or let's say any company that will put you as a contractor to work for a client. It's a consulting company, because the way you will be billed is could be fixed and time material, because the billing will be coming from all the way from the customer to you, and the company will have some commission and the paying rest to you, right? So you will be on the payroll of the consulting company, and you will be giving consulting to a different client in maybe a different country, different domain, etc., and could be anything. So now, and in those kind of company, a project in depth in current organization is very important. And if you are working for a big company like Google, Microsoft or something, they will, I think, mostly prefer for the candidates who are more into the coding, the problem solving and the system design. In my other video, I covered system design fundamentals and the advanced system design distributed. It's very much important for the senior guys, right? Because it's a part of your role. No matter if you are any company, you are consulting in the product base or any company, you will be contributing your valuable inputs into the design. So you must understand the fundamental and the advanced parts of it based on your experience. But now let's in this video discuss the project in depth, because recently I have given one interview where in the final round it was 1 hour and there were 2 people. They almost asked everything about my project. Based on the project knowledge, they will judge you if you have done enough, you know the core concepts, you have done works honestly or not. They will judge you accordingly, right? So it's very important. Let's start with the project in depth in the current organization. So now you see everything in the project in depth current organization has 2 or 3 important factors. One is the application implementation side. So take a page, create a Google document, write all the top main topics. So the way it has been divided is the main topic and we have the subtopic, right? So main topic, we have the application implementation side. Write it down, the application implementation side. Then you have the infra side, right? When I say infra, that means infrastructure side. Third, you have the methodology and the operation side, right? We will see what is it and how are we doing it. We will see. Others you can ignore. Other topics we have covered in the other video. You can go and check it out. So now let's begin with the application part, right? Application implementation side. So you first have the domain architecture. So in your project, you should know the domain architecture. When I say the architecture, not the DevOps architecture, not the implementation infrastructure, you should have a domain architecture. For example, there could be different domains. You have a project, health insurance project, media project, then there could be different domains. There could be claims, there could be benefit, right? If you're a media company, you could have a processor, you could have metadata ingester, etc. So on. From the domain perspective, the business domain perspective, for example, in business there is one accounting, it's a domain. HR, it's a domain. So from all these domain perspective, how your architecture has been divided and created, right? Implementation of it could be anything. We will see to that, right? Now, if you are done with the domain architecture, so that's how you will get an idea of your overall project, right? You may be in the airline field, you may have some kind of ticketing system who is creating the ticket, one system who is putting in the right order, one system who is discarding it or accepting the correct ticket, so one is finalizing it. So these are different domains. Implementation could be anything. Now the fundamental point is, thumb rule is, you should understand the architecture of your project. Architecture could be anything. If you don't know the architecture, try to get those data from your documents, try to understand it from your senior, from the meetings, etc., so and so forth. It's up to you how you understand the project architecture, but that's very important. You can write the project domain architecture, or you could always say project architecture, right? So I'll say project and domain. It's very important, right? Project and domain architecture, and understand the difference, guys, as well. Domain, when I say I have claim processing in my system, now claim processing can be done by 5 different microservices, right? And can be in one, or architecture can be implemented in one monolithic application as well. So that's the project architecture, which is kind of an implementation architecture, right? Then comes your functional part. For example, in your organization, what are the functional features you have developed, right? So can you interviewer can ask you that what is the recent complex feature you developed, and what are the challenges you faced in it, and how did you resolve with it, how did you found a resolution for it, right? So try to see what all features you have implemented. For example, you will say, okay, no, I'm a 3+ year guy, I have only done 2 or 3 development Jira story. But remember, guys, those 2 or 3 stories that you are doing for development must belong to any feature. You should understand it from your business analyst, from your product owner you have. Understand that what are the features you implemented. Then you can present your answer like this in front of any. Okay, we have a feature of login, logout. I contributed. In a way, I developed the backend part of login and logout using Java in terms of microservices, deployed it here, and I did it all those things in X number of days. So that understanding you will have that confidence. Okay, these are the features you developed, right? You can also, if you're a senior guy, you can also think about the complex features you developed and what are the challenges you faced. Because when you're doing a feature, you might have some kind of conflict with your teammates. How did you find a resolution in terms of technical? For example, you have a team of 8 developers working on the same feature. You might have a lot of conflicts while merging the code in a main branch. How did you'd face this problem? This is one challenge. How did you find out the resolution of it? So this kind of understanding you should have in your project, right? So once you know the project architecture, once you have the functional understanding, right, then you should move on to NFR side. When I say NFR side, that means the non-functional requirement side. Non-functional requirement side. Now NFR has different kind of aspects, right? It has the application monitoring. So for example, if you are implementing some kind of the FSD, functional specification document, for any business, and let's say that business is of healthcare domain. Now you will first implement the main functionality, right? That patient record you should be saved into database, can be searched from this UI. These are nothing but the functional requirements. Now there are different non-functional requirements or the NFR side of the project as well. For example, if you are searching from your UI a patient record from your database, although you are getting a patient record but you're getting in the 3 minutes, will that make any sense? Right? No, right? So that record should come out in the few seconds. So that's the NFR side. Although they are passive parameters, but they are very important. But they are very important. So NFR had different aspects. For example, application monitoring. You have your applications and deploying into production. Now, how did you monitor your application? Because at some point you may have some issues with your application. Applications are going down again and again. How are you monitoring it? Now, let's say you have a big microservices architecture. You have almost like 50 to 60 different services. Now one request goes through at least 30 services, right? One request that comes to your microservice architecture for patient record search goes to 30. So let's assume now if there is any issue with the patient record, it's not able to find out and you are getting some kind of exception. Now how will you find out, troubleshoot that from which part of your service you are getting this exception? So it's very difficult problem, right? So the way you will solve it is you will have a common field that will go along across all the 30 services while you're doing a patient search, and now you will attach that particular unique ID to your patient search request. Now for that you will find, for that patient search you will find out the unique value, try to search it. People call it trace ID, right? This is where the concept of distributed tracing comes in, when you are dealing with a distributed system, you are dealing with a microservices architecture. So now that will give you all the records, all the logs from the different individual services. All right guys, so you should know how distributed tracing has been implemented in your project. Then you have the security implementation. So now you see you have API that will get the patient record search, but what is more important, only the trusted origin can call your API patient record search. Not anybody. So you should make it protected. How can you make it protected? In terms of authentication and authorization, you should know how you did it in your project, how your project is doing it. You should have that knowledge. And then you should have the other aspects of NFR. For example, you have different APIs. Every API may or may not have some kind of TPS. For example, one API can handle 30 transactions per second, right? Or maybe in some API you might have implemented rate limiting, so your system do not get overwhelmed. And how did you implement the timeout? So all those different kind of NFR side, you should have those knowledge. Then in the end, in the technical, you will have like the same question I asked you in the beginning, that what are the technical challenges you faced and the resolutions for it. You may not have, you may have, try to find out, list it down, and then before interview just brush it up, and then you'll say these are the technical challenges I faced during the project development phase, and then these are the resolutions we used as a team or as an individual in order to fix it, right? If you are somebody who already has your project into production, I'm sure people and the management interview, they will be asking what are the production issues you face and how did you perform the root cause analysis on it. It's very important. You may be dealing with the Kubernetes architecture, the Kubernetes deployment. You may fall into the issue of heap memory, right? You may fall into the issue of your performance because of the low CPU. All those CPU and the connection pooling you did, because if you are using cloud architecture, if you are using Kubernetes, you must be using kind of VM skill set in the background. Maybe because the way your Kubernetes will be provisioned in the cloud architecture, either AWS or Azure, they will be using VMs, right? Now VM will be of a family type, let's say, and each family type comes with the fixed number of connections for database, CPUs and the main memory. So how are you using all those memory, CPU connections you are getting across your architecture is something that should be done very carefully, right? So you can always tell them, okay, we faced main memory, heap memory issue, but we increased it. We faced CPU, we allotted it more. And then what matters is how you did the RCA. So you can say that we opened some port, right, during the Docker image creation and the container build, and then we connected our visual VM, and then we try to look if there is any deadlock or anything. You try to check and all those things that you can say. So these are the, you can always put up all these analysis that you did as part of RC. You can also say we have a distributed tracing in place and we have a Kibana in place, the elk, Splunk, anything. I went through all the logs and then I checked all the logs and see is there any exception on it, etc., so on and so forth. So these are open-ended questions. These are not fixed. interviewer is only try to understand your understanding, right? How are you approaching the problem? Then once you are done with it, you come up to the infra side and then you focus on the DevOps. How DevOps has been implemented in your organization. Now, what is your DevOps architecture? Your DevOps architecture could be in one place you are using open source. You are not using cloud. You are using on premises. In on premises, you have deployed Jenkins on a VM. All infrastructure as code is being done using Puppet or Ansible, anything. And then all these things you have implemented on-prem. If you are somebody who has infrastructure on cloud, you may have a different deployment architecture. You may be if you're using Azure, you may be using Azure DevOps. Your whole CI/CD is being implemented on Azure DevOps. You are using self-hosted agents. You are deploying on Kubernetes in the Azure Kubernetes. So that deployment architecture, the deployment architecture, the DevOps architecture, you should know. Then you should also know the build pipeline, as you already explained. How are you creating builds and container images if you are using containers, or the basic the build file that you are deploying in the environments. You should know how releases work in your production. For example, if you have production, you have a live environment, your release cycle is not something that you can do it deployment in production anytime. Your releases goes only in the every Wednesday. You prepare a post production change, and then you do it. You mention all the steps, you mention all the rollback and everything, and then that we do it manually, and we get the approval, do it manually, but we do it via CI/CD pipeline. That kind of release understanding, not directly into the production, but let's say if you are using Azure DevOps, you might have a different build pipeline, you might have a different release pipeline. So how you can say we have a different release pipelines for different kind of environments. Based on the pipeline we deploy in a different environment. Answers could be different. Again, there are no fixed answer based on what you are using in your current project. You can always answer, right? Then deployment orchestration, when I say is if you are using OpenShift or using Kubernetes, if you are using containers, then what is the orchestration tool you are using for containers? So you can say that we are using Kubernetes. Which Kubernetes? You are using AWS, you could say we are using EKS, GKS, AKS, that depends, right? So but you should have the understanding. Then comes your packaging tool. You should know how you are packaging your charts, deployment and everything. Many people use Helm, many people use something else, but you should have that knowledge. If there is any packaging tool is being used, what is that tool, how is being used, how it is being implemented in your current any application, related to any application, right? Then you should have any understanding of security. And remember guys, if you are a candidate who has 2 or 3+ experience, nobody will get you in very depth in your DevOps, right? This is for the guys who holds a 6+ experience, 5+ experience, or 8+ experience, right? If you are someone who has less than 5+ experience, you should focus on this part. This is very important for you. And then from here, you should understand build pipeline, release pipeline, the DevOps architecture. DevOps architecture not in very depth. It's good to have. You should use deployment architecture, deployment orchestration, etc. So basic things. And then in the security, you should know if in a deployment level is there any security. For example, you could say no, yes, in Kubernetes we are using certificates. We APIs we are protected using MTLS, mutual TLS, two-way handshake, SSL, or one-way SSL. Depends, right? Different kind of, it could be different kind of, or for you could say for Vera code we are using Prisma, we are using for code or container checks and so forth. And then comes your the security. I think security we already covered, but security in terms of the deployment, you could say if you are using Kubernetes, you could say we have network policies, right? We have the network security group, application security group, where we are authorizing only few ports, not all ports. We have firewall. So those kind of security from the deployment perspective, you can get an idea. Then you should have, as I said, the infra used, that which infra you are using, cloud, on-prem, whatever infrastructure you are using, you should have that knowledge pretty much, right? Then we have the methodology and operation side. Again, it's very important. Then in the methodology side, again, people think, no, I'm a technical guy, I almost know everything, right? Even if I do not understand methodology, that's it's okay. That's not okay. That's clearly not okay. At least from my perspective, that's clearly not okay. If you are 2 plus 2.5 plus experience guy, that's okay, because people will think you are still learning, right? But if you're somebody who holds experience more than 3.5 years of experience, that's not okay. You should understand the methodology and how operations are being done. Eventually your company is doing a business, right? As an engineer or developer, you are part of an operation. That's an operations. It's an operation, right? You should know how these are being handled and being done in your company, at least at the part where you are working at. For example, you should know the agile model, right? If you are following an agile, you should know what are agile, what are different ceremonies. Or people say many people say meetings. For example, you have sprint grooming meeting, you have sprint planning meeting, you have some kind of demo meeting, retro meeting, etc., etc. What is the agenda of these meetings? You should know, right? And then the how requirement drives. For example, you get a story, but why are you working on it? What is the purpose behind it? Maybe being a developer, being a beginner developer, you don't know it. You should always try to get an idea that the code value that I will be contributing as part of this story, where will this make an impact? Your BA might know the answer, your product owner might know the answer. Understand the requirement well, understand where this requirement coming from and why this requirement is coming from. You should have all this knowledge. The feature you did in the beginning in the functional side, you should know that why are you doing this feature, right? So this is a part of methodology. Then many people will ask you about the code reviews, that how you did a code review. And many people can ask you this question. For example, you did a code review for your peer, and then there are some changes. You are asking that guy to make the changes. How will you handle the situation? So the answer to this question, it's an open-ended answer to this question. That depends, right? If we are at the very end of the sprint, I will ask him to create a if these changes are small, I'll ask him to make these changes along with some other story. If the changes are big enough, I'll ask him to create please ask a BA to create another story. I'll try to accommodate in one pointer, right? So there are different scenarios. You should understand the different meetings that you have, and then there could be some situation based questions, right? For example, you could have a conflict with your junior, you could have a conflict with your senior, you could have a conflict with your peer. You have some different opinion, you and that guy has some different opinion. How you are trying to resolve the conflict, right? Or how will you handle any situation? For example, a BA comes in, you have already done a development work, although you are almost done, you are at the 90%. BA comes in and says that the requirement is being changed. Now how will you handle this situation, right? This also matters at the senior level. Now in the end, this last point is only for the senior guys, that if you have if you groomed any juniors, if you are leading any team, if you are a junior, you have juniors, then how did you groom those, right? And what are the ways and approaches you followed, and what are the issues, challenges you faced, and how did you found any resolutions to it? So this is very important question, guys, and almost in all senior interviews this question will come up. You should be preparing for it, right? So you can create a document and write down all these aspects of your project. You should have a strong hold, because during the senior interview many people will be asking the questions from your project. So you should have a very strong hold on your project understanding, and if you cover all these topics, you will have a deep understanding of your project, that what is the how you did the RCA, DevOps, build pipeline, right? The application monitoring. So these are all important. If you have any question, and from this whole topic you want me to create a separate topic. For example, if you want me to create application monitoring a separate video, comment it down, I'll create a new video. If you want me to create a separate video on NFR side, just comment it down, I'll create a new video, right? Same applies for DevOps or architecture. You need to comment it down. You can also comment it down what is the architecture you are following in your organization, right? So this is it, guys. And then I think before this video, the video I created, I covered the different preparation topics and then this preparation topics, and I'm sure that you may see this a lot of things in in the roadmap you will see, but it's not big. If even if you have 45 days, even if you have 1 month, I would say you can prepare each and everything into 1 month. If you want to understand how can you prepare in 1 month, I can come up with a plan as well. You can comment as well how can you prepare in 1 month. 45 days depends on your learning speed, right? If you are a good learner or you are a slow learner, that also depends on it, and what are the ways you follow to learn on it, right? If you want me to cover, anyways, I'm creating a separate a free course in order to cover the topics, few topics out of these. So I'll share with these I'll share that course with you guys. Probably you can go over it, and it's free, right? So all right, guys, so this is it. By this time you might have get an idea, right, how can you prepare for your next backend developer interview. So all the best, and I wish that you get a higher package, right? And if you get higher package, and if you think that this guidance is given you something, comment it down, and then I'll feel better, I'll be glad. So thank you so much, guys.